rocket red glare, reppin' USA, so she go crazy. Mom's bursting in there with the rocket red glare, reppin' USA, so she go crazy. Wait for it, 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 hey.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Latino Free Minds, episode 163. Danny, how you doing, man?
Doing good, doing good. I just found out that it's gonna rain out here next week, and I got super disappointed because I just got used to the sunshine.
I know,
So
dude. It's been 90 the past week out here, and it's gonna rain Monday. It's crazy, but man, I'm excited for today. We have a really good guest on. You know, Ian Smith is the guy we'll have on, and when I first heard of Ian was during COVID, and honestly, like from my personal what I kind of saw, right? Ian had his gym open and they kept telling him to close his gym. And I think they were finding him. He could give exact amounts, but I think it was like over 10 to 15K a day that he kept it open. And he he said, fuck it, and he kept his shit open. And that was something that more and more people should have done. When we were talking with Ian Went last year, he was talking about if more people would have stood up, this would have ended quicker. And Ian Smith was one of the guys that did that. So I'm glad that he's on with us, and we'll bring him in now. Ian, thank you for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. How you doing tonight?
Doing good, doing good. Like I said, another day in paradise. We're out here in California. You're in Florida now.
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I live in Northeast Florida, so not Florida the way most people think about it. It's very quiet Florida, but
Okay, nice.
yeah, I got out of Jersey about 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, man, I remember that during COVID, how that's where I first heard of you. How they were telling you to close your gym, close your gym. I think I remember seeing a clip. Did they board the door and you kicked that shit in?
Yeah,
Or like,
that was several months in after we had sort of things had gone into the court system, and they were doing also, and they were weaponizing whatever governmental systems and organizations that they could. In California was really big on using the health department with a lot of places.
yeah,
Some states were using the sheriff's office or whatever it was. With New Jersey, it was the court system because the police weren't really that cooperative with Governor Murphy's wishes. So yeah, they had boarded up our doors at one point. I think that was about 3 or 4 months in. Well, they locked the doors. They changed the locks on our doors. That was the first step. It was a series of escalations, and they were coming to lock the doors a second time, and that we decided that we were going to take the doors off the hinges as a sort of go ahead and lock our doors, and they couldn't figure out where the doors were because we hid them, so they arrested us. And when we came back, they put like quarter-inch plywood up, though. It's like, I don't know whose idea it was to get quarter-inch plywood. Like, if you looked at any of the people who worked out in that gym, not even myself, I mean, that was a gym full of heavy hitters. So obviously that plywood didn't stay very long, and that was a video that wound up getting featured on Tucker Carlson and stuff like that when we kicked
okay.
it.
No, that was. I remember seeing that, and here in California, it was Newsom, and yeah, he was using the health board, and he was using a lot of law enforcement. You know what I mean? They arrested the dude that was in the middle of the ocean paddleboarding by himself, and it's like that happened here, and because we're having our governor race this year, and from my personal perspective, it's like that's why I respect Chad Bianco a lot, because he was the first sheriff in California that said, no, I'm not doing that. And then after that, more and more sheriffs start to kind of speak up, but he was the first one. So, he's running for governor now, and it's like, okay, I respect it, because when shit was going down, he stood up. You know what I mean?
He did his
And
job. That's his
did
job.
his
That's
job.
the
Yeah.
if you look at the foundation of law enforcement, a sheriff's job is to protect the citizens, and that means against the government as well. That's kind of one of the fundamental job descriptions of the sheriff. The sheriff is there to keep the government in line, whereas your typical police are there to sort of keep the criminals in line. The sheriff is supposed to be there to say, hey, this is unlawful. This is unconstitutional. So the man did his job, and he should, we're at a day and age where that's uncommon. You know what I mean? So big up to him and any other sheriff. There were a lot of sheriffs. The Camden County sheriffs, where I was at in New Jersey, they were definitely not on our side. Whereas like the New Jersey State Police was on our side. So anybody in law enforcement during that time, I think, that disobeyed the orders to go in and shut people down, I think needs to be commended for that, because it wasn't easy, obviously.
No,
It wasn't
not
easier than opening your gym or whatever else. But that was an act, at that time, that was an act of bravery, and that should be
Yeah.
commended.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Thanks, Ian, for being on with this. And after your experience, going to court, like you said, they were using the courts, to kind of enforce these mandates. So after going back and forth with the courts, one of the big questions that I have is, what are these mandates? Are do they have any legal standing? I mean, they're not laws, so
No.
they make them up, and how do they enforce them? Did they stand up in court?
So, I'll give you a short sort of overview of the court process, because we got really, really wrapped up in court, and we were very, very fortunate because we had the support system that we did, because we weren't the only business that opened. Oh, my camera's going crazy here.
We'll see him right now when he fixes his camera. I heard a saying. When you're doing something good and it starts to go bad, it's because the devil doesn't want you to do it.
I believe that. I had a
So,
weird coincidence at work today. Is that I was getting some bad news, something that was going down. Oh, I think he's back.
let me see. We'll get him.
Well, I was getting some bad news, and I had spoken to someone the day prior to that wanted to come back, to our company,
Mhm.
and everything just worked out. And as this person is giving me this bad news, I'm texting the other person that I was talking to yesterday, and God just works in mysterious ways. And, that bad news was no news because of what had transpired even the day before. So, yeah, things happen for a reason.
Yeah. No, it's probably the FBI. Someone on someone on Instagram said the FBI is doing this. Which, hopefully he comes back on here. But that's one question I wanted to ask him, because I know at one point too he met Dan Bongino. I don't know if he met Cash Patel too. So I want to kind of ask him about those guys for sure. But yeah, man.
Hey,
No.
since while we're waiting for him, and you brought Dan Bongino up, what do you think of the way that he's reacting and everything?
Dude, he looks. I don't know. He's like over. I don't know. He's like over. It's weird to me the way he's reacting. I feel like in his gut or in his soul, he knows, like, yeah, I didn't live up to all that talk. But now it's like he's just talking more to try to cover up all the
And it
previous.
and it's worse, and it's making it worse, and it's
Yeah,
making them look more suspect.
yeah, it is. It is.
And then, something interesting is with Joe Kent. He's talking all kinds of smack about Joe Kent
Mhm.
resigning, and it's like, dude, you resigned from the FBI too for personal reasons, and what are
Yeah,
you doing?
dude.
What he's saying, it doesn't make any sense.
That's exactly what I was gonna say too, because Bongino resigned and nobody gave him anything. Oh, he wasn't a quitter. He wasn't whatever they're calling him, a coward and or whatnot. And it's like, here you go, got him back. Um, go ahead, Ian.
Sorry about
We
that.
got you back. No, you're good. You're good, brother. Um,
So, to look at things legally, what they did originally was they sent the cops in. That was within the first week or so. And the cops were sort of just monitoring the situation. Then they started to escalate, because every day the news was out there. We had the news coverage on us at all times, and we had far more than we had ever expected, thanks to Tucker Carlson. I went on Tucker Carlson a week before we opened, so when we opened those doors, Fox National was there, NBC, ABC, everybody was there. Like even the Spanish channel was there. Everybody was there. Public television was there. NPR, everything. So, we had a lot of eyes on us, and because of that, it worked out. But because of that, we also got really severely punished because every day, I'm sure Gavin Newsom did it. Every day, Governor Murphy would do his little like COVID press briefing or whatever. I'm sure. Newsom did it too, where they would like rattle off the deaths and all this.
And
the news would ask Governor Murphy. Yeah, exactly. The news would ask Murphy, "What are you going to do about these two gym owners? What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" So every day he felt pressured. So very quickly, it was police presence, and then it was police cracking down, and then it was us defying the police, and then it was health department came, the sheriffs came in, we told them to get lost. They brought in the New Jersey State Police. The New Jersey State Police said no. And then that's when they started with their lawsuits. So what they did was the violation of the mandate didn't actually hold any weight. And the court system actually didn't even know how to process it because it's never really been used. So they charged because most of these violation of an executive order charges have been written back in like the 1920s, 1910s, and they're not even up to the current criminal code of your state. You know what I mean? Like in New Jersey, the criminal code is 2C, and that's all the criminal statutes, and the courts know how to handle those things. This was like 8A. Like it wasn't even like the judge who was overseeing it was like, I don't know what to do with this. So they gave us a whole bunch of those, and they're basically like parking tickets. Like they don't really mean anything. But then what they did was they took all those parking tickets, they took the health department shutdown that we had, and they took the executive order and they went to a judge and they said, we want you to issue a closure order on them. So what it became after, the only way they could put some teeth into it was it became a court order from a judge for us to shut her down for us, because when you defy a judge's order, whether it's right or it's wrong, you have to abide by that order, and that's where those tangible punishments started to come in. That's when they could lock our doors. That's when they could arrest us. That's when they could start fining us. That's when they could empty our bank accounts. All the things that they subsequently did came from the violation of a court order, not a violation of the mandates. Don't mean jack shit.
That answers everything, because I've been asking that question for a long time with several different guests. No one told me anything. But you actually went through that process, and then it's the judicial branch that actually ended up enforcing it. And what ended up happening with all of that at the end of it?
So we wound up all together. We were in court in the township, so we were in municipal court. We had like 80 or 90 municipal citations, which were violation of a governor's orders, which was disturbing the peace, which was improper zoning, whatever it was. They were throwing everything they could at us. And those were all those little charges. And then when they did that court order, we wound up in civil court with the state for violation of a court order, or violation of a court order, whatever the terminology is. And then they took that same court order and they charged us criminally too. So they tried to throw us in prison for 4 years. So we were in municipal court, we were in civil state court, we were in the appellate division in the civil state court, we were in the criminal system in the state court. We were in federal court because we sued the state in federal court. And then we were also, I think that's it. We were in 5 courts. Yeah. Okay. So it's 5 courts. And then, I'm sorry. We were also suing the township as well. So we had lawsuits kind of firing back and forth at each other. And the criminal ones came sort of late, but they were actually something to be very serious about, as we could have faced a year in prison. at like best case scenario. So what we wound up doing is, and our because we're literally throwing money in every direction at this point. And we just had to allocate resources, and we don't have time to go to trial on a criminal charge where we could potentially wind up with a year in prison. You don't know these New Jersey judges. You don't know what they're going to do. So it's like, it's not even worth the gamble. You know, they gave us a year probation. I say, give it to me, I'll take it. So that was the first one that ended. The civil court stuff went on for years. And in 2023, they just sort of started to back off of it. They didn't really have, because what they would do is they would put these, these fines against us. They started fining us $15,000 per day somewhere in, I believe it was in August of 2020. $15,497.76 per day. I'll remember that number for the rest of my life. And, at first it was like, screw you, whatever. And then, the second one hits and the third one hits. And then you get from 5 figures to 6 figures. And then you get from 6 figures to 7 figures and start getting a little nervous. But then you realize once you pass 7 figures, you're like, this is monopoly money at this point. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to, you're going to come take my personal assets? Okay, take my 25-year-old, F-250 if you want, I guess. Or I'll just put it under my mom's name. So they attacked our bank accounts. They took about $200,000 from our bank accounts, our business accounts, and they tried to pierce the LLC. But we were able to move our money around. So what we did for the remainder, while they were trying to get this money, we would just open bank accounts. We would open a business. We'd start a new LLC every so often, and any money that came into it, we would just pay our bills ahead of time. We would just pay our bills. We'd pay rent. We'd pay utilities. We'd pay this. So what are you going to do? You're going to bleed a stone? By the time they found the bank account, we'd have another one open. And we used to have fun with it. We used to name it like Murphy's Favorite Gym LLC, or whatever it was. So eventually they just got tired because there was nothing that they could do to us. It became very clear. And COVID, the COVID madness sort of declined. They sort of lost the support of the people. Even the craziest of COVID idiots, in 2023, they were done too. They were, they might still virtue signal with the mask, but they're not interested in the state spending any more money, whatever. Yeah. So that just kind of lost steam. And then the township had taken our business licenses, and we sued the township. And we would sue and lose.
You froze up.
A lawyer after 5 or 6 lawsuits. And, he said, I remember it clear as day. He said, when are these guys going to stop? When are they going to stop suing us? The township, it was a small town. The township can't afford to fight these legal battles anymore. And my lawyer said, you think these guys are going to stop? You think they're going to, you don't get it yet? In 2022, they're still rocking and rolling, and the country still supports them. So the township wound up giving back our business license in late 2022, which was actually, I'm sorry, it was late 2022, which was a huge win. That was a huge win for us because it signaled that there was no longer anything wrong, and that's right around the time that the state stopped sort of attacking us because. What are you going to do at that point? You're going to drag us through court. Every time that they did something, we were so lucky that we had the platform that I had developed. Because of the exposure with Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, all these people who kind of platformed me in the beginning, is when they would do something stupid, I would just put it out there. And as it stretched into 2022 and then 2023, they just lost the support and they just didn't have the firepower anymore. So that all went away. And then the final thing was all of the municipal charges. That got kicked into another township because of a conflict of interest. And it sat untouched for 4 years. And eventually the judge in that township said, the state is not doing anything with this. They haven't given us any direction. And she dismissed it as a violation of our constitutional rights because it was a violation which means it could never be revisited again. So that's really it. It kind of all just fizzled out. There wasn't a huge win. Now, my former business partner and I, we wound up separating. I moved to Florida. And we had some disagreements in the end. He wanted to continue to sue them back. And while I certainly understand that, we spent $750,000 just to stay open, just to lose in court. I just wasn't personal anymore. You know, for me, the victory was they came, they tried to shut us down, and they absolutely could not. And that is enough of a victory. My camera is going nuts again. I'm going to switch onto my phone after this. But to me, that was enough of a victory, is that we didn't need to prove it to these people anymore. They couldn't shut us down. They tried their hardest, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, you know,
I'm switching over here, but go ahead. I'm going to jump in on the camera before I leave.
sounds good. No, I mean it's crazy. You know, that time period, everything that happened, and you know, people like yourself, and I'm sure there's others that went through that. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Let me switch this real quick. All right.
There
Oh,
we
here.
go. All righty. Sorry for the technical difficulties, fellas.
Nah, you're good, man.
No,
But
you know
go
what?
ahead.
I just want to throw this in there. Is you know, there's people out there that are fighters. Obviously, you're one of them. You know, to do that, it takes guts, sacrifice, and courage to do that. But at the same time, you showed the roadmap to people on how to react in those situations. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that I can imagine is if other people stood up and did what you did in unison at the same time, you know, all of that would have been de-escalated, and it wouldn't have taken so long to get to the point that you got to. But you're absolutely right. You know, that you should take that as a win because you showed that they can't do anything to you if you stand up on what's right. And you know, a mandate isn't a law, and that's what people need to understand. Who the hell came up with this mandate? The who? You know, that organization that really they can't enforce anything that you know that they came up with as a mandate. So it just shows people the roadmap on what they should do is, you know, have some
Yeah.
courage, and it takes a sacrifice. But if we all work together, we can accomplish things together. But you know, that's the whole thing with uh, uh, you know, separating us. You know, it's divide and conquer at the end of the day.
Yeah, you know, a couple points to what you said. You know, when we opened, we really thought that like we were gonna open and we were gonna like stand up and there was gonna be like an army of businesses behind us. And in New Jersey, you know, because we originally shut down for a little while. We shut down for the first couple weeks, you know, because we just didn't know enough to confidently stay open, right?
Mhm.
There last thing we would want to do is hurt somebody. So we stayed closed, and then we started talking about reopening. We started kind of letting people know that we were doing it, and this Facebook group got created, and it was New Jersey small businesses, and we everybody was supposed to open on the same day. And
Mm.
there was like 1,000 businesses in the state of New Jersey that were like, "Yeah, we're all opening," and three opened.
Oh, dang.
The gym, there was another gym in North Jersey that opened, and there was a restaurant that opened, and that was it. And we really thought like we thought we would take the first punch, and then we would show everybody like, yeah, like we're here, you know, like we're still standing, and that everybody else would stand up. And I mean that did happen. It just took a lot longer than we had
Go for
originally
it.
thought that it would. Um, but
That's
yeah, you
crazy.
know, if you look at that, right? So if you look at like, you know, what happened to Tin Horn Flats in LA. I don't know where in California you guys are, but Tin Horn Flats was a restaurant in LA. Or even look at what happened to the gym, right?
Mhm.
They put all their firepower. The state of New Jersey leaned all their weight in on us. If there was just one other business who did that in the same way that we did, or did that in the same way that Tin Horn Flats did in LA, um,
It would have taken up
all of
more.
that firepower
Yeah.
gets separated into two. So it's if two people
Mhm.
stand up, it's half as bad as it would have been. If three people stand up, it's a third of as bad. And that number, like for every individual that you add, they get exponentially weaker. You know, their power gets fractionalized very, very quickly. You know, so imagine if you had, you know, 100 businesses in LA or in Orange County, or 1,000 businesses through the state of California, a couple in every county who all said, piss off, man. We're not doing this. In New Jersey, if there was 1,000 businesses that would open, they wouldn't even know where to direct their energy. It would have been, going to what Danny said, it would have been over immediately.
Yeah.
And I wound up writing about this. I wrote a book on the back end of this, and that's kind of the one thing I tried to end with is like, we don't really understand the average person. We tell ourselves this lie that somehow what you do doesn't matter, right? The choices that you make don't matter. In 2020, if you ever would have asked me that my little gym in a sleepy suburb of New Jersey would have had the impact that it did on so many people. I've met thousands of people through the years who've said, you've had this direct impact. It down. You've had this direct impact on my life. You've inspired me. You showed me this. You showed me that. That's not what I planned to do. I was just standing up for myself,
Mhm.
but you don't know who's watching you. You don't know who's inspired by you. So you have to do the right thing. You have to make the hard choice. And when you do, everybody that I know who made that hard choice, their life wound up better in some form later down the line. And when we all stand up together, it's, having gone through it myself, having gone through the court system, it's scary, right? But most of what they talk about and most of what they threaten you with is just threats. It's smoke and mirrors, it's empty. They barely follow through on the stuff. And even when they do, it doesn't have as much bite as you think it's going to. And if people realize that, and if people share that burden, right? If two
Mhm.
people do it instead of one, if three people do it instead of two, if 30 people do it instead of three, whatever, your power gets exponentially larger and their power diminishes exponentially,
Mhm.
and it does so very, very quickly. And if more people understood that, I think that we would be looking at a very different political landscape today. We'd be looking at a very different society because people don't understand how important their actions actually are.
Yeah, and exactly to what you said, right? It lessens, diminishes their resources because, like you said, if you got 30 companies you're trying to go at the same time, and
Yeah,
it's that thing, right? You hear it all the time. There's more of us than them, and that's
it's
in a
so simple.
situation like that. That's when you can prove that, hey, if we all get up together, there's more of us than them, and it ain't gonna work. And you know, and I hope that a lot of people have learn from that, right? So that as you go in the future and you might see something like this try to happen again or whatnot, we're more aware. Like you said, man, the first 2 weeks, like you're like, all right, this is different, this is new. You kind of like, okay, well, what's going on? I think that was a natural reaction for everybody. But
Sure,
once you
sure. Yeah,
once you
yeah.
once you saw that it kept going and going and going, it's like, all right, what the hell's going on? Nobody I knew was getting sick, and we couldn't go to the store. We couldn't do. It's like it was getting ridiculous. Um, they didn't
Yeah,
want you to get together
common
with your
sense kicks
family.
in relatively quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So, hopefully people have we'll keep that in mind. Hopefully they do not forget because a lot of people do have, we've said it before in the podcast, they have short-term memories and they forget things.
They definitely
And
do.
we could switch it up. Go ahead. I think you're on mute, Danny.
Sorry about that. Well, let's to the point that you're making right now is that when they try to do it again, let's hope that people will stand up next time around, because I think COVID red pilled a lot of people and saw how it took away everybody's rights. In the most essential way. Just think about it. I had a high school son that graduated at that time and didn't even get to walk. He got
Yep.
separated from all his schoolmates and stuff like that. Uh, you know, Kids started going into deep depressions. I think if you look at the stats, suicide rates, climbed, and it had real effects, man. And people are still recovering from that. Um, I'm 48, so I went through the '08, crisis, and through COVID, and those were the hardest times for me to go through financially. And we were looking around us in our community and friends that we had, and a lot of couples broke up because of financial strain that causes in
Yeah.
relationships and stuff like that. So when we look back in those situations, we got to remember that shit. We can't let that happen because the consequences that they have are long lasting. I would say they last a lifetime as far as the effects that they have in our lives. So let's hope that next time it comes around, we react the way that Ian did. I know I defied, those rules and everything. My sister, your wife, Daniel,
Mhm.
quit her job because they were trying to enforce them. She actually
Yeah.
sacrificed and went through that. So we just need more people to react that way.
Hmm.
To wrap up this kind of line of thought, you know, one thing that people have said to me, I've always tried to chat with as many people as I could, because people were so good to us during COVID. I never wanted to be somebody who was kind of elevated and then didn't have time to talk to people. So I've talked to thousands of people through the years, and people have thanked us for what we did at COVID, and all that, but that act of defiance, Dan, your wife, that act of defiance to stand up and lose her job is just as important as the stuff that makes the news. Your act of defiance, not wearing a mask going into a grocery store, just because there's not any cameras around and nobody's following you on Instagram for it and you're not getting likes and all this stuff, doesn't mean it's not important, and doesn't mean it doesn't matter, and doesn't mean that it's not adding to the pile, because it really does. And that's
Hmm.
just super important to think about. Like, you don't have to be a news story to make a difference. That those acts right there, saying no, I'm not getting the vaccine, no, I'm not wearing a mask, that requires the same exact amount of bravery and courage and fundamental patriotic vigor as what we did at the gym. It's just, we just had cameras on us, so that's the one thing I hope people really, really take away from this is you don't need to have a big platform to be influential, and what you do matters, and it matters in your own life, but it also, with the example with your wife, like, there may have been another person at work who was influenced by her decision and saw her walk away and was this close to getting the shot because they were scared, right? And they just saw your wife do it, or you walked into the grocery store, you didn't have a mask on, and there's that other person in there who really disagrees with what's going on, and you give them just that little bit of extra push, and they say, you know what, screw this, I'm not wearing this mask, I'm not taking that shot. You never know who is watching you, and if you don't think about that, you tend to ignore how powerful you really are as an individual.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. I agree with that. Um, but hey, let's move on to today.
All righty, let's talk about it.
All right. Look. So, election night, we did a show. Right. We were on live, kind of tracking what was happening, and for the most part, we figured, okay, Trump's going to win. And this is 2024, right? And one of the things we said when we were on and we saw that Trump was going to win was, cool. He got in. He got the House. He got the Senate. The one thing that we warned people on was the House and the Senate not doing a damn thing. And if they didn't do anything, this was going to be a really awkward 2 years. And kind of what we're seeing now is they're not doing anything. Trump's doing things different than what he said he was going to do. And here's one thing for us, like, we're not a super big platform, but we've always tried to call things how they are, right? And that's one of the reasons, like, we respect you, Ian Went, Bobby, because you guys call it how it is. And that's what we've tried to do. Is like, all right, it doesn't matter if I got to hold Biden accountable or Trump accountable. I'm gonna do it to both, because
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
what
And you
matters.
should you should hold your side even more accountable than you do the other.
It,
If you're gonna, have my support, right? If you're gonna have my vote, then I want to make sure that you're doing what you said you're gonna do.
Mhm.
And there seems to be this huge disconnect, politically. It's a changing thing. Thankfully, it's changing in the right direction. But I've always been critical of Trump. I was critical of Trump in his first term, and people used to, like, they would, like, lose their minds, like, if you say he does anything bad, and it's like, you know that whole idea that you only criticize your opponent, and that you don't criticize or hold accountable your own side, is the most foolish political notion I think of anything.
Mhm.
Because that is the way that we all get taken advantage of, because the left defends the left and the right defends the right, and the criminals wearing the blue ties and the red ties are laughing all the way to the bank. because they're just ping ponging the ball back and forth, and when one side's in power, they're like, oh no, please don't criticize us from the right. You're so mean. And then the left comes back in and it's back and forth. And we have to hold a certain standard. The same way that you hold a personal standard, you have to hold. I hold a standard for everybody in my life. I hold a standard for myself. I hold a standard for my family. I hold a standard for my friends. I hold a standard for my business and my employees. Why would I not extend that same line of thought to the people that I vote for to run my country and spend my tax dollars?
Yeah, I was gonna make that point too. Is that I actually have really high standard for my kids. It's I'll give you an example for my son. It's like I'm harder. I would be harder on him than someone that I don't know or an employee.
Yeah.
So it's like because we want them to represent themselves well, and we want them to represent the family well. So why wouldn't we do that? It's stupid and it's foolish. And I don't know when this started. It's politics. I was telling Daniel this is that there had to be a certain point in history where there wasn't this um, approach of it's just politics and we're just gonna let it go because it's just politics. I would say it's just bullshit. So, let's pull the bullshit aside
Yep.
and do what your hat actually says. I read that before we went on, and it's like, what does it say?
Yeah.
Make a politician scared again or something like that.
Make
So,
politicians afraid again. Yeah.
yeah. So that's what we need to do, and
Mhm.
it's called accountability. And it's like, if we're not going to be men and women enough to hold representatives accountable, then what the hell are we good for? A vote.
Yeah, on the back end of COVID, I wound up running for Congress, and this is where I really, I've been politically active for most of my life. I watched the Twin Towers, come down. Wasn't an airplane, but I watched the Twin Towers fall. And I was, I think, in 10th grade at the time, and I remember thinking as a young man, how did this happen? Right. So I got into politics back then, and I was into Ron Paul, the sort of right leaning libertarian crowd. And then George Bush got in, and I hated the right, and I was actually left leaning for a little while because I saw what the neoconservatives were doing in the Middle East, and while I didn't understand it to the extent that I do today, I understood that it was fundamentally wrong, and I was tired of watching my friends who I grew up with go over there and come back in boxes or with missing legs or arms or disfigured physically or mentally. So I've always been involved in politics, but when COVID came around, I became sort of the darling of the right. Like they would roll out the red carpet for me anywhere I went. They would call me. I had speaking engagements. I had sponsorship opportunities. I had all these things because I was the COVID guy. I was the New Jersey gym owner. I got invitations to CPAC. I spoke at the Million MAGA March. I spoke at January 5th. Spoke at January 6th. I got invites to Mar-a-Lago. All these things, and I was in that crowd. And it wasn't until I ran for Congress that I truly realized that we have a fundamentally broken political system. Excuse me. So I ran for Congress on the back end in 2023 in New Jersey. And it became very clear very, very quickly that the GOP wanted no parts of me as an elected official. Um, the people did, but the mechanisms of the state GOP said no thanks because they knew who I was. They knew that if I got elected, they weren't going to be able to say, "Hey, this is how we do things here." I was going to say, "Well, sorry, I'm not here to stay. I'm not here for I'm here for a good time, not a long time. I'm not here to be a career politician." That was the
Or
entire
straight.
platform I ran on. Was that that we don't need politicians, we need people. We need people to step up and to you know Plato wrote about this. Socrates talked about this. This is not a new idea. In the Republic, he writes about the fact that the politician class should be an act of service. It should not be a career. It should not be a lifelong thing because you're incentivized to stay. So you're going to bend the rules. You're going to, to power. When you start getting that type of power and it's unrestricted and you're not very intentional around it, it'll fundamentally change who you are. And most people who get into politics, I truly believe, aren't bad people. They're weak people, and they get molded by the power that comes with it. And I saw this all from the inside. So when I ran for Congress, I made my announcement, and the
Democrats put out a hit piece on me right away. The Republicans put out a hit piece on me 5 minutes later, and it looked like they had the same copywriter. They had this guy named Bob Healy who was like the pick. His dad was some big donor, and this dude was basically a slice of white bread in a suit. Had no flavor, no opinions. It was just, he was just as regular as it got. Yes, sir, no, sir. And then there's me. I got a loud mouth. I curse a lot. I'm not your average politician. I don't want to be a politician. I'm doing this
You're
because I
not
feel like
reading
it's the
this.
right thing to do. And they look at a guy like Bob Healy and they go, he's controllable. We can give this guy a stake and a nice salary, and some cuts, and he'll vote exactly the way that we want him to do. He'll be a good boy. And then they're looking at me and they're going, dude, this guy didn't shut his gym down for COVID. When it comes down to voting for, whatever, he's going to think for himself. So when I ran, I saw that the GOP is not the friend of your average person who's on the right. They don't care what you think. Um, the process of getting into the primaries and stuff, like they used to set up events for their guy and they would not invite me or any of the other candidates. So you're getting all this GOP funding, that comes from donors, that comes from the people who donate to the GOP, who should be able to see all of their candidates. And you have the GOP spending the money so that they don't see any of the other candidates. So they're actively screwing you over from the second you donate to them. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And we ran a good campaign. We did ultimately lose in a three-way race. I got 40% of the vote. It was 60-40 and 10, or 50-40 and 10, whatever it was. But I saw the GOP for what it was. I really did. I saw, all these invitations to Mar-a-Lago and stuff like that. I saw that the political system runs on money, and everybody has their grubby fucking paws in it. And most of the power is actually behind the scenes. It's the people with the databases. It's the people who own, the logistics, the text messaging and the media and all this, and the political operatives who will work for one campaign and next cycle work for a completely different ideological camp. They do not care. They are slimy and greasy, and they don't play nice. And the way that we ran a campaign on ideas, we ran a campaign fundamentally. This is my platform. My platform back then was America First. Anything that ever came across my desk, that was my answer. What do I think of this? What do I think of that? Well, I'm going to look through it of the lens of America First and New Jersey First. Is this good for America, and is this good for my constituents? And if it's not, get it off my desk. They ran a campaign entirely on negativity, and they
Smearing
outspent
that.
us.
Yeah.
Yep, that's all it is. They didn't present any ideas. It was just, look at Ian. He's a bad guy. He went to prison before. He did this. He did that. And that was it. They didn't present any ideas. But what they do is they have all of this funding, and they wait until the last month or so right before the election, and they just text message every day. They text message, they run commercials, and it's all negative ads. And I'm an easy target when it comes to negativity. I haven't lived a squeaky clean life by any stretch of the imagination. And they know that the average person would rather have a polished turd than somebody real.
Yeah.
And I think that's starting to change. I really do think that's starting to change. But your average voter, your voter over the age of 40, over the age of 50, your boomer crowd, they don't want to see somebody real. They want to see the nice, polished politician, who's got their makeup on and got their spray tan on and, looks like a Gavin Newsom or whatever it is, and just hits the talking points. They don't want to have real conversations, and they play to that voter block, and that's how they win, and it's really sad to see, because there's so many good people who don't even want to jump into politics because it's such an ugly world. It's so ugly. It's so nasty. They will find out. They will talk to your ex-girlfriend from high school and find out what you did wrong to her. And they make it so that it's so difficult. You have to have money to run a campaign, but your average person, it's hard to raise money. It's you don't have the resources. They have the infrastructure, and they give the infrastructure to the person that they want to win the primary. Whether it's Democrat or Republican, they hand that infrastructure to their pick, and that person gets an overwhelming head start. They're usually able to raise two, three, four, five times as much money without blinking. And yeah, that was sort of my black pill moment. Where I was like, man, these guys aren't my friends either. These guys, and I started to think about it. I'm like, man, none of these people came to the gym. Like none of these, the guy that was running for governor, Jack Cettarelli is his name. He's a total dork. He was the Republican running in New Jersey. And like where were you, dude? Like where were you the whole time? Where were I started thinking about where were my senators? Where were my representatives? Where was anybody on the right in New Jersey politically? We had a bunch of candidates who showed up, a bunch of dark horse candidates, but we didn't have any elected politicians in the GOP. There's not a single one who showed up at the gym to say, I stand with you.
Yeah.
And after I ran, that was kind of it. Where I knew what was coming with Trump 2.0. I kept an open heart, hopefully that it would be something different, but I saw this one coming from like a mile away, and I got criticized very early for it. And it turns out, not I wasn't the only one saying it, but we were right. We were right. He came in and he's the biggest politician. This is a guy who ran as an outsider who surrounded himself for a second time with nothing but insiders.
Yeah. The Lindsey Grahams, Ted Cruz's. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but we've been talking about that, Ian, in the past couple of weeks in regards to you know, with the gubernatorial race going on in California, is that there's people coming in with the smear campaigns, and it's like, why don't you talk about your accomplishments, your resume, your ideas, your solutions, or anything like that? And they straight just go right for the smear campaign ads,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it's like, why aren't people asking, wait, hold up, I don't want to hear about what the other person did wrong. It's like a job interview. Let me see your resume. Let me see what you've
Yeah.
done.
Do you go into a job interview and go, oh, that guy that was in here
That guy
before,
sucks.
dude, he's got all these speeding tickets. Like, no, you go in there and you present yourself. That's a perfect way of, that's beautifully said. It's like, that's exactly what it should be. It should be a presentation of your ideas. But you've got these guys that run or get ran for that matter. These guys are all Muppets, dude. Like they got a hand so far up their ass, like it's not even funny. Um, but they don't have their own ideas, and they're not intelligent individuals. They're sneaky and they're conniving, and they're very snaky. But these aren't people. You're not getting people who are running who are accomplished business owners who have accomplishments. Like you said, you don't have people running saying, you know what, I've built a business from the ground up. I'm a self-made millionaire. I don't have any debt. I'm educated in this manner, blah, blah, blah. Like you've got a couple of them. You've got like Thomas Massey's an example of that. So Thomas Massey's an individual who's successful before he got to Congress. That should be a prerequisite. What have you accomplished in the real world? Oh, cool. You went to college and then you went to law school. You've never had a real job in your life. And here you are applying to run something that you have no idea how it works. And that's why they don't have anything to talk about, because 90% of these people, if not more, have never accomplished one thing in their life besides getting an education as a poli sci major, going to law school, maybe, or working as a political operative and then deciding to run at some point.
Yeah. Another thing with that is that, we've talked about it before in our podcast, is that those people that you're describing, the slime balls, um, get to that point in political power, and I mean, they're still pawns. We obviously agree with you. Everybody knows that, but the
Yeah.
reason that they get there is because they don't have morals. They're morally corrupt, and they'll do shit that people with morals wouldn't do. And you said it earlier, the people that do have morals get demoralized and don't even want to run for any political positions, whether it's, federal or local or anything like that, because they don't want to deal with its politics. It should be
Mhm.
just about, let's get the job done. And this is what I can do. These are my accomplishments and abilities, and do that. But um, you talked about how it's changing. So, um, we kind of see that too. We see the momentum changing. There's a lot of people speaking up. Kind of like what you were, describing, and what Trump isn't doing, and what you saw that was coming. And what's really encouraging is that a lot of people are speaking up, but then here we go with the puppets. These
Hmm.
influencers are starting to sound alike. They're starting to sound like parrots. They're saying the same
Mhm.
thing because they probably, like Daniel's motioning over there, is they're getting a little bit of the $7,000 per clip thing. So
Yeah,
it's
no.
obvious.
I mean, I've seen that from the inside. When my platform exploded to 500,000 followers, 1 million over all my platforms, man, there's all sorts of offers, dude. And I've got offers for TV shows. I've got offers. They wanted me on Fox Nation. And what happens with let's talk specifically about these influencer class, right? So these are these are people who are absolute fucking losers in real life. These are people who think, not anything against anybody with a podcast or anything like that, but these are people who decide that this is going to be their full time job, that they're just going to yap, right? This isn't something that they do, to spread awareness. This is something where they don't have a real business, they don't have a real job, they got popular, and then all of a sudden, it's like, ooh, what brand deals can I get? And that's all cool. I had brand deals. I'm not going to knock that, right? And if you can have it as a side hustle, cool. And if you've got a voice and you've got an opinion to share, absolutely start a podcast. Absolutely start a channel. Speak your mind. But what starts happening is these people get access to the MAGA sort of ecosystem, and that ecosystem pays really, really well, right? But in order to sell Trump shirts, you've got to support Trump on everything he does. If you want to get the invite to Mar-a-Lago, right, where you're going to meet the wellness company or whatever new
Hmm.
thing, Good Ranchers was one of them. All these brands. If you want to meet the guy who's going to give you Good Ranchers, used to pay me $30,000 a year when they first started, you know, and hey, as soon as I mentioned something about Israel, they voided that contract, so.
That was
I
that
lost
was
I
in the
lost $100,000 in contracts on October 8th. October 8th, I lost $100,000
Oh,
in contracts. Gone. Um, the only brand that has ever let me speak my mind
there you
that
go.
I rep is First Form, right? And
This
that's
guy
and
right
and
here.
I stand by Andy to the day I die, because Andy. So there's sometimes Andy and I disagree, but he's always said to me, bro, as long as you're telling the truth, man, I don't care who gets offended,
Hmm.
but these influencers, they get this little business going, right? And then, I used to get emails from PragerU, right? And in the beginning, I didn't really know what these were. Oh, sign up for this. There's this, post this survey for us, right? And we'll pay you 10 cents per click on the survey. Yeah, I just made $150 today. Wow, that was pretty cool. I'm gonna post this one. I'm gonna post this one. Meanwhile, you're data harvesting for the GOP. So you're getting names and emails and all that stuff, which is, whatever. That's not too bad. But then next thing you know, you start to get these people start to get addicted to this money, because now they're like, oh, I don't need my 9 to 5. I'm quitting it. I'll be an influencer. And in order to stay in that sphere of influence, to get amplified, to get the invites to Mar-a-Lago, all that stuff, you have to you're allowed some deviation. You're allowed a little bit, right? You know, back when the vaccine was a big thing, I was still sort of in that crowd. Nobody got mad at me for saying don't take the vaccine. Right. And I used to go on speaking tours. I was on the speaking tour called the Reawaken Tour. Trump Jr. was there. Eric Trump was there. We used to go all over the country once a month. Right. And this was a big deal. I was one of the headliners. I had spoke at probably 12 out of the 15 or even more of it was like 75% of them. These places you could go and you could sell your t-shirts, you could do whatever you wanted there. You just go and you spoke, and there was thousands of people at these events. And it's the flyover states, it's Kansas, it's Missouri, it's Idaho, and you're in Trump country. So you could go there and you could profit really, really well. And all I ever did was sell the gym t-shirts. But you could go there. October 8th, I got a phone call. You are no longer welcome on the speaking tour from Trump. That comes directly from Trump's camp. I had spoke for years, for two years, and I stepped out of line. I didn't even step out of line. The only thing I said was, I don't believe that a bunch of guys flying hang gliders and giant fans flew over the most militarized border in the world. This smells like 9/11. And the contracts came to a screeching halt, and the speaking engagements came to a screeching halt. I never got another invitation to Mar-a-Lago. I never got another invitation to fly out and speak for another candidate. It all came to a screeching halt because I broke the unspoken rule of the GOP, and that was do not question the geopolitical policies of Israel, and do not ever mention anything about them other than your unwavering, undying support. And you see now, I mean, you see it clear as day. You see the MAGA influencers who are still hanging on. And I love seeing these people get beat up in the comments. I love it because Brandon Tate, they all look so stressed out. I mean, you guys look chill. You guys look like you're having a good time. You're enjoying your life. Like, you know, whereas these guys, Brandon Tatum's going on his lives and he's just getting pelted in the comments because everybody knows you're fucking lying now. Everybody knows that you're lying. And it's becoming more and more obvious. The more you double down, this guy is preaching Christianity. He's preaching false Christianity, and Christians are waking up, and people on the right are waking up because nobody can ignore the fact that this sucks right now in this country. You
Yeah.
can gaslight us all you want. You can put out your influencer slop all you want about Trump's 100% approval rating. Bro,
Okay.
my gas is $4. You know what? I don't care. I don't care about Trump anything right now. You guys in California, I'm sure you're probably even higher than
I'll
that.
take $4.
Yeah, $4 sounds
Yeah.
good. Can you send me some?
Yeah. Yeah, but at a certain point, even the most tuned out person, right? Even somebody who's really, MAGA crowd, and that's what you're seeing. People are going, wait a second, it's been a year, and I still can't go to the grocery store for less than $100 for some milk and some
Yeah.
eggs.
Dude,
You
I
know,
counted it. It was like 5 or 6 items over $100,
It's crazy.
and it was just like essential stuff. Did he freeze up? I think he froze up.
He might have. But yeah, man.
no,
Oh, there he is.
I froze again. Sorry,
You're
Oh,
good.
I'm back. Go ahead.
Go
What
ahead,
were you
Dan.
gonna say, man?
Yeah, but
Oh.
anytime I go to the grocery store, it's $100, and you can only ignore that for so long until you're like, I got some questions.
Mhm.
And what's happening is regular people are looking to these same podcasters and these same influencers for the guidance that they once actually deserved to have or deserved to have a platform for. The people speaking up against COVID and stuff like that. A lot of these people earned that platform back then, and then they sold their soul.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why people like Ben Shapiro's losing $2,000 or $2,000, 2,000 subscribers a week. They are hemorrhaging because I don't care what you say anymore because I can't afford to live.
Mhm.
I make a fairly good. I'm reading the comment here. Gas is $5.79. That's insane. I'm reading a comment on the live from Patricia. That's insane.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty fortunate. I do well for myself. In business, I've never felt more poor in my life. I felt, in 2019 when I first opened the gym and I was barely hitting $100,000 a year. When I was making 90 some or 80 some thousand. I had so much money I didn't know what to do with. I was going out to dinner all the night. I was going out to granted I've had a kid and so it's not exactly one to one, but still I ended 2019 with so much money in my bank account and I went on vacations and I went to dinner and I didn't even think about money. Fast forward to 2025 or 2026 and I'm making significantly more than that and I'm like I don't know where my money goes. I don't know, it's gone. All I did was go to the grocery store and now I'm waiting on my next paycheck.
Yeah.
So when it comes to your average American who's not, your average family's making maybe $100,000 combined, give or take, depending on where you live in the country. How is it hard to get by with $100,000? It's insane that
Yeah.
that has become the new standard, and people are seeing that, and it's snapping them out of this spell, and it's a good thing because things need to get bad in order for things to get
Or the
better.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
People have to feel the pain a
yeah.
little bit. And I don't wish that upon anybody. I don't wish financial distress or anything upon anybody, but that'll wake you up,
Yeah.
because we need you. Like we need you guys to wake up because what you're eventually going to see, and you've seen people talk about tax revolt and stuff like that. So I think it's a good thing. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think there's still some more pain to be felt, but this administration looks like it resembles the Biden administration at this point. I mean, they don't even care. Like, you guys remember the Biden administration? It's like they just did stuff, and they were like, well, whatever. Like, screw you guys. Trump said today. I was browsing Twitter before I came on. He said in a press conference, I like to call it a military strike because if I call it a war, then I have to get congressional approval. And it's like, what did you just say?
Yeah, just
I
do
think
what you want.
said the quiet part out loud. He wasn't supposed to say
Yeah,
that.
like, and but
Oops. Hold on.
that's very Joe Biden-ish. Like, that's
Mhm.
very like, like that's what Joe Biden was. He was just a runaway train, and the Trump administration is really starting to resemble that.
Yeah. No, it's funny because you reminded me that during the Biden administration, I saw the meme that said, I forget what the picture was, but it said, I'm making the most money I've
Danny,
ever
I
made,
lost your audio.
and I'm still broke. Oh, can you hear me? No, Danny. Let's go.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
you're back. You're back. You're back. You're back. Sorry.
Okay. You hear me good? Sorry. I don't think you hear me.
No, I still can't hear.
Go, Danny. Go for it.
Can you hear me, Ian?
Yeah, I can hear you, Danny.
Okay. No, while Daniel gets his audio back, you brought up Officer Tatum, and I just wanted to point this out. Is I saw a little clip. He just came up on my feed. I don't know why, but um, he literally was. He had papers, and he was literally reading a script and reading a verse from the Bible, and this dude didn't even have the common sense to actually let me grab a real Bible and read this verse off of it. It's like he got emailed a script and he's
Yeah.
literally reading that script, and he doesn't even realize that he's showing everybody that he's reading the script. And aside from reading a script, it's completely backwards. It's morbid what he's reading. It's not even true. Like you said, they're preaching false Christianity, and I just had to point that out because you brought up his name. But
Yeah, and that I think is one of those powerful forces in this country is the awakening Christian. Christianity has been rocked to sleep um over, the past 80 years in this country, um by this idea of hyphenated Christianity, as I like to call it, Judeo Christianity, you know, and it's through the churches, it's through a lot of the churches of the non secular churches and all these other sort of new denominations, and they've twisted the word of God. They've twisted the word of God in the Bible. When they talk about Israel, they're not talking about the lines that were drawn on the map in 1940, whatever, by the United Kingdom and by the Rothschild family. That's not what they are talking about. And then you've got your influencer class and your politician class, your Lindsey Grahams and your your
yes,
Mark
sir.
Levin, and they've taken this literal idea of Israel and they into supporting horrific things. Supporting the slaughter of innocent children, innocent women. Like the Gaza thing was, I think, one of the most disgusting things that we've seen in current day. The people cheering this stuff on as if you are some sort of hero, sitting back and allowing corrupted politicians to sign their names on bombs that would cause the death of an unarmed woman or child. That is the most unchristian. That's absolute heresy. That is absolute heresy. That is not what Christianity is about, and it's not what America is about. That's not what uh, America's founded on standing their ground. It's not founded on imperialism, and it's certainly not founded on being Israel's bitch. And
One thing that I
people
would
didn't see that for a long time.
is that the nation was created in revolt to not being able to practice their religion. Now we're being handed a religion that is being force fed to
Yeah.
us, and now we have to go through that revolt again. We have to figure out that what's being preached to us isn't correct, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like history is repeating itself. So now we have to go through this revolt and rejection of what they're trying to cram down our throats with their little scripts that they're reading on actual Instagram clips or podcasts or whatever the hell it is. So I think it's part of the awakening that you were talking about before, because it's right in our face and we see the blasphemy, and a lot of people, like you said in those comments, are calling him out hard.
Yeah.
He's getting torched, but not just him, but everybody.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, I think, to see the awakening Christian spirit, because is under Christ there is no division. you know Christianity, and hey, if you're not Christian, that it doesn't mean that you can't, you can't join our squad. That's not it.
Yeah.
But under Christianity, uh we're all together. We're all together under Christ. Doesn't matter the color of your skin, doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter the language you speak. And what you're seeing in this country is a healing of those divides that they've imposed, through societal forces and through political forces, through things like BLM and stuff like that. And now you're having the average Christian saying, wait a second, hold on. So you're telling me that I have to support these people over there who are dropping bombs because they're God's chosen people. But if I really take the time and read the Bible, I'll find out that those same people broke the covenant that they had with God. All I have to do is open my own Bible, and I have to read it a little bit harder. But now, since I can't afford anything to go anywhere, I have some more time to read my Bible, so I'm going to, and that's what you're seeing. And thanks to the bravery of a lot of people who have come out and who have spoken with large platforms, um, and took those initial hits, and being critical of Israel, you're starting to see so many people, regular people, who are now see the veil has been lifted. It's just like when everybody started seeing the truth with COVID. Everybody kind of starts pulling their veil up at once, and then all of a sudden, what was a really small voice is magnified, and you start talking to people who aren't even political, and they're like, man, you know I don't like what's going on over there. Our politicians are. I talked to a buddy of mine who's not political at all the other day, and we were talking about how stuff's expensive, and he goes, "Yeah, man, Trump just loves doing whatever Israel wants," and he's like the most non-political person ever. And I was so shocked that he said that, because I was like, "Oh, like you've been paying attention." He's like, "Dude, how can I not?" He's like, "Dude, my stocks are tanking. Like my 401k just took a dump, and I can't even afford to fill up my gas tank. How can I not pay attention?" So I think these people are wearing out their welcome. What
You
happens
know,
next, I don't know what it looks like, but I definitely think that people are really getting sick and tired of what's going on.
okay,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna back up what you just said right now. Live experience from today at work. Um, I was having a conversation with someone, and we were talking about how expensive gas was. Right? It's like it's common to have that conversation nowadays. And someone to my left that was overhearing our conversation, under their breath mumbled, "It's because of the Jews." And I was like, and it was someone
Hey, come
young
on over
too.
here, man.
It was someone young too. She was about, I want to say, 26 ish. So I was like, that's a good sign. And in my mind, I was like,
I don't know if Ian can hear me, but
Yeah,
someone,
I can hear you.
literally someone today told me that same thing that Danny said that person whispered. I heard the same thing today from someone else.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous. We have to be careful with our language, right? As
Yeah.
individuals, I always try to correct people. It's that saying it's the Jews is, I think, you're setting yourself up for the movement not to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you need to do is you need to identify
"Oh,
the individuals who are doing it, and it's the powerful people who are pulling the strings in Israel and stuff like that. Just like it's not my fault America's dropping bombs in Gaza, or it's not Americans who are doing it, so you do have to walk that line.
Mm-hmm.
But people, what happens, and this has happened before in history. This has happened many, many times. It's happened 109 times. People start getting sick of this particular culture, who come into their area and who loan money at exorbitant rates, and who push degeneracy, and who are subversive in almost everything that they do, and then cry the victim. and then put in the laws. It's not the first time this song and dance has come about. So we have to be bold in what we say, but we do have to make sure that we're not arming the enemy by speaking in a way that they can use against us, because that's always been a tactic of Israel. Is they do things and then people go, it's the Jews, and then they go, anti-Semitism, and
Yeah.
then it's a weapon. So you have to be very specific about who you blame, because you're playing into their hand when you do that. It's
Always
the same. It's
victim.
the same way with any other form of racism, right? Like, if you wanted to call the black community out, for the high rate of crime, you have to make sure that you're talking about groups of individuals. You're not talking about an entire population, because if you want your message to get across, you do have to tailor it in a way where it's not going to get turned back against you, because that is what these people have always done. And Israel and the Zionist crowd are incredibly good at doing this. They're incredibly good. I mean, the ACLU runs on donations, and what they do is they love to find the unhinged Jew hater, and show him to everybody, and then all the donations come in
Yeah.
from everybody saying, "Oh my God, that's so horrible," and then they have all this money to fuck with people. So
Yeah.
you have to be careful, but it is though. These people aren't wrong. The two people that you talk to, they're not wrong.
Well, I'll make this point. So you're 100% right. We have to be careful because they use that as a
Yep.
weapon, just like you said, and it's a tactic. It's not an accident. It's a tactic, and this is what happens is that they like to lump everything in. So let's say, for example, they bring up the question, are you a Zionist? And what is the definition of a Zionist? That Israel has the right to exist, right? The state of Israel has the right to exist. So then they mind fuck you into, well, if I say no, I believe this, but I want everybody to exist. So, but I don't support what they're doing. And then they lump themselves in with being a Jew, which they're not even practicing Jews. So then that mind fuck gets even further deeper into the rabbit hole. But then everybody lumps them in together to use that phrase that we were talking about earlier that we heard, right? So you're right. We have to educate ourselves and make sure that people are using proper terms or ways to describe it. But I think
Yeah,
that's
you just
kind
have
of
to control. I think you have to control your tone. You have to control, because it's easy to get angry about this stuff too.
oh
It's
yeah,
it's very easy to get
it's
angry about the
emotional.
injustices, and but you just want to, they to bring it back a little bit to what we were talking about. One of the things that we did really well at the gym, during COVID, is that we always laughed. No matter what Governor Murphy did to us, you didn't see us like lunatics screaming into the cameras. We were always able to present our ideas in a logical and very sound manner. And that's why we became so dangerous, because if they would have got a news clip of me outside, fuck the cops, or whatever, like going crazy, they would have played that over and over and over and over again, and nobody would have heard my message, which was a completely rational message. So you just have to be very careful of that, because the people who are pulling the strings, you have to give them credit. They're very smart. They're very, they're not good people, but they are very, very conniving, and they have been working on these things for a very long time, and they've refined the tactics behind what they do, and they're usually a step or two ahead. So you just have to kind of tread carefully, because you don't want to fall into their trap.
They have a lot of resources, which means money. So
Yes. Yeah. Very much so.
So,
Well, when they're
Ian,
printing it, I mean, they can just print
yeah.
some more.
yeah, that is true.
So to kind of wrap up here, we did want to ask you one more question. Because Danny, when you cut out the first time, Danny asked me this question. I was like, oh, we should ask we should ask you about him, Bongino. What are your thoughts on him right now? Like as you see him, like what vibe do you get from him?
Well, he looks like shit. He looks so defeated. So Dan and I were actually fairly good friends. I not like a best friend, but Dan came to the gym. Um,
Oh,
Dan
that's
came to the gym. he contacted us pretty early on, probably like 2 months in. You know, I got a text one day. It was like, "Hey, is this Ian?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Who's this?" It's like Dan Bongino, and I was like, "Oh shit, I listened to your podcast, man." And he's like, "Dude, what you guys are doing at the gym is so awesome. You know, I want to fly up there and get a workout in. Can I come?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, like, come on, bro." Like, so he came, and he really helped us build. You know, it was right around the time that BLM kicked off. So COVID went down in the news, and we were getting hammered by the state, and all the media coverage was kind of on BLM at the time. So we were like, you know, our success really hinged on being, you know, in the public's eye. So he came at a time that was really important. We did a podcast in the gym. He brought his whole crew there. We got a workout in. He's a really great guy. I was very impressed by him. I was very proud, you know, to kind of call him a friend. He actually supported me in my campaign run when I ran for Congress, and I've been a fan of his show for years. I mean, I listened to, he was ranting and raving about Pizzagate all the way back to like 2016, 2017. You know, and he was telling us how important it was that we never let this go. Don't let the Epstein thing go. You know, and then he gets into the FBI, and all of a sudden he's a fucking bootlicker, and he's a suit, man. And he looks at the American public with a straight face and said, well, I saw everything, you know what? And I don't have any questions. And to me, that makes you a traitor and a coward of the highest order. Because, and I don't know, maybe they got something on you, bro. I don't know. Maybe they got your balls in a vice. I don't know. But this is a man who has shown the world a tough guy persona his whole life, right? Oh, I was Secret Service. I'm this. I'm Dan Bongino. You know, we got to get in there and kick the deep state's ass, bro. You got in there and licked the deep state's ass. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and then you're in and out in a year. You totally betray the American people on the number one. I don't care what the media says. I don't care what any of these influencers say. The number one most important thing in the political world is getting to the bottom of who was behind Epstein and what does it all mean, and why are not every single one of those people in prison for the rest of their lives, if not a wood chipper.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Because until we figure that out, we don't have a political system, and we know that. We know these people were blackmailed. The evidence is already there in the files that got dumped in the WikiLeaks leaks dump in 2017 and 2019. It's all already there. And then you've got the administration, Patel, whatever that blonde chick's name, I forget her name, Bondi and Bongino. And they're like this dynamic, just trio of absolute traitors. You know, we know, and these people ran on this. Trump ran on it. Don Jr. I have audio clips of all these guys. Oh, the Democrats, the Epstein files, this and that, and then they do a backflip 180, not even a 180. It's like a
360.
Misty flip, yeah. At that point, and they give us the binders. Don't forget about the binders. 55 weeks. We're at 55 weeks. You got to celebrate every week. DC Grano and all the idiots holding their binders, which had less information that was publicly available online, and it was more redacted. And then the files were coming, and then they weren't coming, and then they were on the desk, and then there's a second part coming, and then no, there's not. There's really not anything else to be seen, and then everybody who wants them to be released is now a traitor. And now you're gaslighting the people. And Bongino is an integral part of that. And I've lost every ounce of respect that I have. And I think he's an absolute coward. I think he's an absolute traitor. And I think he deserves what he's getting, because everywhere he goes now, people call him out. Mm-hmm. And when you look at his face, he looks like a man who is defeated. He looks like a man who has sold his soul. And I said that to him, and he blocked me. He blocked me right away on Twitter when I called him a bitch. But that's not what this country needs. And then he has the audacity after all of that, is he goes back to his podcast studio and sits on his high horse and criticizes anybody who dares question the administration. He comes at me and you and anybody who just has some questions, mm-hmm. and says, "You're a black pillar. You're part of the problem. You're this, you're that." Meanwhile, he's living in his multi-million-dollar mansion, and the rest of us are still struggling to buy eggs. And the rest of us can barely afford to fill up our gas tank. But we're the problem because we want to know why our country is being run by pedophiles. It's like I think is one of the most disappointing things, because I genuinely liked Dan Bongino. There were a couple people during COVID who I met who were really good to me. Tucker Carlson was one of them. I'll always have a tremendous amount of respect for Tucker, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Tucker because he has broken away and he has shown that he is a man that can change his mind. One of the coolest things I ever heard Tucker say was, he said, "I can't believe that I supported the Iraq War." You know, and I think that's really amazing. An individual to be able, nobody remembers that he did that, or very few people, and nobody's calling him out for it. But he came out and he said that. He came out and he said, "I can't believe that I supported that." So he was able to go back and say, "I was wrong. I was wrong. I don't always have it right." You know, so Tucker was one of them, and Dan Bongino was like a close second. I really, I had a lot of love in my heart for him, and that is easily one of the most disappointing things I've seen this year. Is just, this man is like a shell of himself. People used to look at him like he was a superhero, and now he's just the next bootlicker, in the administration.
Yeah. One of the things that makes you a strong individual and independent individual is being able to admit when you're wrong, because when you put yourself into a box, and this is what these guys did, is they put themselves in a box publicly, for the jobs that they had, the careers that they had. And to your point, Tucker Carlson to me is a real man because he can admit that he's wrong and he can step outside of the box that he was in. And all these other fools that are stuck in that box, aren't independent. They're not real men or women, if you will, or genuine people. Let's just say that, because they're stuck in that box and they can't get out of it for whatever reason, whether it's, they're getting paid or they got something on them, or they just don't want to admit that they've been wrong. So,
Yeah. No, it really, a sign of intelligence is being able to change your mind when you're presented with new information. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I didn't know that before, and I do now. And as a result of me knowing this now, I now feel different about the situation."
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means that you learned something, which
Yeah.
means that you're smart.
Yeah. You're just processing that information, and hey, there's nothing wrong with it. But I think it's hard for people to admit that they are wrong or that they believed in something and oh man, it just didn't it didn't play out the way I wanted it to. And that's life, in general. But you you have to, man. You have to be able to get that information and not just throw it away because it didn't jive with what you thought, you know?
Exactly.
And I think we see a lot of people kind of taking new information and having new stances, and then we also see the people that just they dug their heels in and they're just gonna roll with that. So you know, but we'll see. I think people will notice who's trying to do what and all that. But we're trying to be we try to be truthful, try to be genuine, and like I said, we're gonna call it how we see it, and it might not make everyone happy all the time, but hey, it
If you're
is what it
making
is.
everybody happy, you're not doing a whole lot. It's
Yeah.
easy to make everybody happy. It really is. Just don't do anything, right? Um, if you're making people unhappy, I've learned this along, quite a few years ago now, is that like, if people are upset with what you're saying, chances are there's something that you're saying that is resonating and they just don't like it,
Hmm.
and I think that's important. It's important for especially the men in this country, to speak their mind, to not be afraid. This is just COVID over again. It's the same thing. Now
it
it's
is.
just it's isolated within the right. I've got more people who follow my Instagram page now that are on the left and that are in the center than I've ever had. I lose about 1,000 followers a day and gain about 1,000 followers a day, and it's just new people coming in. And actually, the discussions that are being had are a lot better, and the ideas that are being presented and some of the stuff that I'm being sent in my DMs is opening my mind because I'm talking to people who might not align with me on everything, but they want the same things. They want safe neighborhoods. They want their money to be worth something. They want relatively good education system for their kids. We all kind of want the same 99% of things. We might not agree on this and that, but they're just as tired on the left of their guys as we are. And we're bonding over that because now we're going, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. You don't like your team either. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing because in order for the system to change, I do think people have to lose faith in it. And they have to start saying, you know what? I quit, dude. Like, come get your taxes if you want. I'm not paying them. and see how far these people will push it. Because when people start resisting, you'll see the politicians start to squirm. And when they squirm, that's when they deviate from this game plan that they have, and they start making the mistakes that they do. And I saw that personally with Governor Murphy. The more we would get under this guy's skin, the crazier he would act, and then the stupider he would look. So, I think we're trending in the right direction. I just think there's definitely a little bit more turbulence ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ian, I thank you for your time, man. I know it's later where you're at, but we thank you, dude, for coming on, for having this conversation. We love doing this. We love talking to people, and we hope to have you on again in the future. And God bless you and keep doing your thing, man.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for the time. I appreciate it, man.
All
No,
right,
thank you,
everybody.
Ian. Is there any? I mean, where can people find you? What are you doing nowadays? Or
So people can find me on Instagram or on Twitter. I'm usually just on Instagram, and I've been, I've been a little bit more quiet overall, but it's just Ian Smith Fitness. You can find all my stuff there, what I'm up to. I run a couple different companies. I run Summit Rejuvenation. We're a national hormone clinic that offers hormones and peptides in all 50 states, medical licensing, doctor prescribed, stuff like that. So after I got out of the gym industry, I'm in that. Still work for First Form, partner at Recovery CBD. So just in a bunch of ventures now, and focusing on being a father and all the good things ahead. I have to say that after the COVID stuff, I kind of went through a lull, and was disenfranchised with what's going on in this country. And I know that a lot of people do feel like that, but it's very important that we live beautiful lives and we live excellent lives in the process. Like our friend says, personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion. And I truly do believe that if you are sick and tired of what's going on, it's important to pay attention, but it's also important to pay attention to your own life, because there is a lot of control that we can have as individuals. So I try to focus on that, and I try to focus on that with my content, educate people, but also kind of focus on how we can get healthier, how we can get wealthier, and how we can stand up. Because if you don't have any money and you don't have your health, it's a lot harder to say no to the government next time they try to do something stupid.
For sure, man.
well said, well put.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Ian.
Cool. All right, everybody.
Alrighty,
Thank you for
guys.
tuning
You have,
in.
you have a
Catch
good
you
night.
next one. You too, man. Peace be with you. God
Peace
bless
be
you.
with you.